And we are live. Hello and welcome to Fermenting Opinions. I'm your statist cuck host, David Biden.
And I'm your non-statist cuck host, James McVeigh.
We are Fermenting Opinions, the podcast and hangout show in search of a more palatable political ferment. Tonight we have with us Seth Campbell, and we have Brandon joining us for the first time, who is... a guy I found on the internet. And Siobhan, one of our regular fermenters. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Tonight we are talking about net neutrality. And I was hoping we're going to have a little bit more opposition in viewpoints. But this is basically a discussion of net neutrality and whether or not we should repeal essentially rules that enforce this via the FCC. What net neutrality is essentially is rules that prevent internet service providers, and this is just top level stuff for anybody who's not familiar, who's just tuning in on this, that prevent internet providers from throttling back or providing fast lane options to specific content, say on the internet, or use of specific apps or things like that, or just other services or packages. Via, what they give you access to. Do you want to jump in on that?
I was going to say, actually, moreover, what it is an FCC regulation that makes or places internet service providers and internet access in general into a utility realm, which basically says that everything is created equally. You're basically paying for the data that you're using, however they want to do data packages for that, but they can't restrict it based on content.
Right.
That's a good description.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's probably a more...
Thank you. Yeah, it's a little more concise. No, that's fine. That's fine. And
so like the analogy for a utility company would be if you're buying electricity, they can't charge you more if you use it for your dishwasher versus using it for your toaster. If you're using the same amount of electricity.
Exactly.
Is there a parallel to make with a cable package somewhere?
Well, yeah, essentially what the ISPs want to do when they remove net neutrality would be to turn it into a cable package.
Okay.
Like, oh, you want to have a streaming package for, say, Netflix, Hulu, and Crunchyroll. Well, okay, well then you have to pay X amount of dollars on top of whatever your current rate is.
Which it's worth noting they have done in other countries. Like they do treat it like cable packages where you have to buy the one channel that you like along with 20 other channels you don't give a fuck about.
Yeah, so that leads to the question of, let's ask the real questions here. What does the porn package consist of?
Right.
That's what everyone uses the internet for anyway. There was an Avenue Q song about this specifically. The internet is for porn. I mean, that's what people use. That's what people use the internet
I remember that, actually. It's really funny. Before we started, I was trying to explain to a friend of mine who doesn't know a lot about this. Like, what's that net neutrality about? He's like, dude, you need to get out more. Like, talking about, ISPs and all this stuff. I was like, it means they can charge you more for going to free porn sites because they want to, or they can throttle back your bandwidth if you don't pay more. That's effectively what it would mean without these rules in place. And he's like, oh, it's like, see, now we're on board. Okay.
Hitting them where it hurts.
Yeah, hit him where it hurts. Pal, right in the kisser. All right. So the guy behind this. Okay, first of all, the vote on this thing by the FCC happens on December 14th. So this is coming up real soon. Probably going to be voted out. Just because of the composition of what is like a 5-person panel or something like that.
Yeah.
It's going to vote whether or not to keep or get rid of it. And the person who basically chairs this thing is a guy named Ajit Pai, who's probably been all over the media lately because he's gotten a lot of criticism. He was appointed back last term, not as the head of FCC, but he was actually appointed by Obama, which raises questions. But he's very anti-regulation. He's very doctrinaire about that. And he thought net neutrality was a bad idea when they were trying to put it in place in 2015. He was very much against it when let me see here, a guy named Tom Wheeler, who was at a FCC at the time, was instituting those rules. He opposed this guy. But now Tom Wheeler's not at the helm anymore, and now it's Ajit Pai, and he's all about slash and burn this thing because free market decide or something like that. Basically, as you had mentioned before, this thing's done under Title II, which had to be put in place because, and this is important, and a lot of people who are proponents of ending net neutrality rules sort of gloss over this, is because we had internet service providers already try to fuck with their competition and with consumers. That essentially in 2007, Comcast, which I think is a repeat offender here, was actually throttling back traffic to a site called BitTorrent. And BitTorrent had and this isn't illegal downloads of anything, but sorry,
And that's okay. Now I'm wondering what you use BitTorrent for that's not illegal.
Hey man,
no, this was a specific website though.
And other countries use Joe. I mean, they just do because they don't get access to the real.
I mean, there are BitTorrent sites, but this is like a specific name.
Okay.
And anyway, BitTorrent had actual contracts with basically through other basically Hollywood producers, which are like sort of making that content available for download legally, as a service, which went against, basically was competing with Comcast TV. So they're like, let's dial these guys back, and they got sued and they lost. And then in 2011, Google came out with a wallet app where it's like you had this app on your phone and you just wave it and use it like a credit card, just almost like the hotel key card kind of thing.
Precursor to Apple Pay.
Yeah.
Like Apple. Yeah.
And so Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile, well, they had a competing app. So what did they decide is on anything that their service was going to, any phone that was going to be on these carriers, you just couldn't download the Google Wallet app. They decided, no, you can't do that. And again, this is basically ISPs fucking with the competition and fucking with consumers, for profit. And this is why, and I can't remember which one of these it was, but one of these went to court and failed essentially for the side of the consumers, saying, well, look, right now it's categorized as essentially as a commodity, I guess,
Sure.
Information. If you guys want to have rules about this, it has to be categorized essentially as a utility, as common carrier of like the phone service or gas, electricity, these kinds of things, or more in that vein. And so that's where these rules came from in the first place. And so
David,
when people
did you talk about the Netflix issue with Comcast?
No, go ahead.
Okay, so that was another one. I just wanted to mention that because it's probably a little more relevant to most of us. But remember when you were watching Netflix and you get that nasty little buffering notice?
All the time.
Comcast throttled the bandwidth for Netflix when its users were trying to stream videos on Netflix in an effort to, number one, coerce Netflix into paying it more money for a fast lane, and number two, to dissuade people from cutting the cable cord. So because Netflix was a competitor for paid content like that, Comcast was throttling the bandwidth for Netflix users specifically to keep people from doing that. To make people buy a cable package and then also to, blackmail Netflix into paying for a fast lane, which worked actually. They paid for it. And then immediately if you watch the graph, the bandwidth available for Netflix users skyrocketed literally the next day.
And see, now that to me makes a little bit of sense because we were reading some information earlier today that shows that at peak hours, Netflix makes up 37% of the United States' entire bandwidth usage every day.
So what?
I mean, as far as the market goes, I mean, if you're an IS or you're a service provider,
yeah.
I mean, your customers who don't use Netflix are basically being pushed out simply by a pay for service that charges $8.99 a month or whatever, and that's that. And if Netflix wants that kind of bandwidth usage, I can understand the market adaptation that says you guys probably should pay us more to eat all our bandwidth.
But you pay, my internet service is based on, how much bandwidth I use at a time. So,
for sure.
My point is that, you shouldn't be allowed to necessarily go over your allowable bandwidth, But what you use your bandwidth for is your own business.
Sure, and I agree from a
And
consumer
that's not what they were doing. They were specifically targeting Netflix
Mhm.
in an effort to not only coerce them into like favorable contract terms, but to number two, keep people from cutting the cable cord and to make them, force them to buy cable subscriptions.
And your number 2 point I'm totally on board with. I'm just saying that from a business versus business perspective, I get the idea of trying to basically keep this behemoth in check that's saying, look, we're the internet service provider. We're the ones responsible for the bandwidth allowance that goes to our consumers. You're eating up a crap ton of it, and you're not paying any more than anybody else.
So what?
So I get it as a
I'm eating it up. It's not Netflix.
sure, but Netflix.
I mean, that's why I bought it.
But
right?
Netflix is the
Right?
one. But Netflix is the one reaping the rewards. Aside from the consumers getting enjoyment out of it, Netflix is the one making money hand over fist to not pay more than anybody else, but eat up the bandwidth. So I get their idea there, but I understand exactly what you're saying on point number 2, because that's my problem, is that now you want to put it on consumers where you want to kind of force consumers to get their content from you and your service because they're cutting cords. That's the shady part that I'm not okay with.
Well, I mean,
Well, I
yeah.
mean,
Well, okay. I'll let Brandon talk about
Go ahead,
this.
Brandon.
I apologize.
More about it.
No,
I
fine.
rudely interrupted you. So personally, for one of the things that's very interesting from an ISP standpoint is they can redirect. So if you go to like say Netflix.com, they could redirect you to the website for their service. I mean, they could do a lot more scary things than just, traffic manipulation on that side. They could do all sorts of just generally what would be considered an IT security standpoint malicious activity.
Could they, and Brandon, I'm asking you this, could they, I mean, theoretically, could they just block you entirely from going to Netflix and just say
Is there
content
a
not
level
allowed?
to the brashness? Like,
But that's not hard, I mean, at that point, because when you think about it, most of what Netflix, well, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with how Netflix actually hosts all their stuff, but it's through AWS, Amazon Web Services.
Mm-hmm.
And they could just block that whole subnet range, which is a range of IP addresses allotted to those servers that run all of Netflix's general services.
Yeah, and they could just.
So it's not hard for them to do it.
And in
Yeah,
fact,
it
they
is frightening.
do it based on Netflix itself does it based on your location. I mean, it's location specific content, right? So it's not like this isn't something that isn't done generally.
Well, they could definitely pick up your location very easily. It's not hard to do. I mean, if I want to make myself look like I'm in Russia, that's not hard to do.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can use a proxy
Proxy.
server.
Or if you're in
VPN.
Russia, you try to make yourself look like you're in America.
Yeah, I know,
I
right?
mean, the VPN does that for you too.
I
So
was going to say, if you're not using a VPN in 2017, you probably don't know a whole lot about the internet in general. But that's a whole nother thing.
Anyway.
Well, I mean, the only thing you'd be dodging is maybe your ISP. You're not going to dodge someone like the NSA. If the NSA wants
Oh,
to
of
find
course
out
not.
what you're doing, that's not hard for them to do.
Yeah, definitely. But
the VPN tunnel won't protect you from them.
no, they'll just follow it.
So what do we
Well,
think?
not only
is-
could they do that, I mean, they could just crack it. I mean, there's in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, there's a some government type stuff related to like supercomputers cracking cryptography, which is what VPNs rely on.
Yes,
it's not
indeed.
particularly
Oak Ridge
hard.
is a very interesting area, isn't it? That's a
Oh,
whole other
yeah,
topic.
there's-
Yeah, that's a whole
Yeah.
other topic. Yeah, but so I mean, do we feel like net neutrality is corporate welfare for Netflix? Is that a fair?
Well, that's a load of shite.
That's an argument.
That's a
an
load of
argument I've
shite. Get
heard.
that crap out of here.
Yeah, I agree with Brandon. I mean, that is a literally indefensible position, in my opinion.
I've heard that. I've heard that it's corporate welfare, and I just don't get it. I mean, I do understand the general idea of Netflix sucking bandwidth, and I get that, but
Isn't that like punishing
Really?
them for having a successful
No,
product?
then
Like,
that's
I
kind
mean,
of how I
that
feel
sounds like-
about it too. Is
for me.
that I mean, where's the
Isn't
actual
that anti-free market?
This is not actual corporate welfare. Where are their tax breaks? Where the undeserved tax breaks or whatever they're getting, or something like that. Like Facebook makes $2 billion a year in tax breaks just for existing. That's corporate welfare.
Yeah.
Netflix is just getting a better deal out of it because they're not able to be strong-armed into paying more for bandwidth because they're eating it up.
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean,
so
beta
let's-
pump.
so
Go
let's-
ahead. Go ahead, Siobhan.
Let's
Sorry.
talk about the eating up bandwidth issue because you've said that a couple of times.
Mhm.
And in my mind, I mean, I pay for a certain amount of bandwidth or like a certain upload and download speed based on my internet package.
Yes.
And what I use that upload and download speed for and when I use it shouldn't matter. Just like,
Agreed.
you know, I mean, you use your air conditioning more in the summer than you do in the winter. And
You pay more, but you pay more in electric bills for usage. But I mean, that's because it's directly tied to rate of usage.
Right.
With natural gas.
They don't charge you more for using electricity during the day than they do at night.
No, they don't. You're right.
X amount per kilowatt hour, you know,
Mhm.
based on like, yeah, you know, like some places are like, we'll charge you less if you use 1,000 kilowatt hours. And then if you use over that, we'll charge you more, right?
Yes.
Doesn't matter what you use it for, right? Doesn't matter when you use it.
Sure.
Doesn't matter if you're using it to, you know, power your like speakers or your washer or your dryer or your dishwasher or whatever, right?
Mhm.
So the
Or your
internet
marijuana grow operation or whatever, you know.
I mean, you know, James has like a vibrating bed and he uses all
You got to
of his
spend money to make money. Man.
That's right, baby. This is America.
It's a heated hot tub. I got nothing. Anyway.
So what do you guys think of the argument that net neutrality stifles innovation? Because the one argument I heard, I spent a lot of time on Reason.com last night. I got to tell you.
Alrighty.
So sorry.
And I feel like I need to wash my eyes out with bleach.
It's not that
Well,
bad.
you probably
most of the
should,
time.
because that is a load of crap. But
you have to take a really hot shower.
so
Like
I'm going to go ahead
smoking.
and kind of jump into this just for a second, if y'all don't
Sure,
mind.
please do.
Go for it.
Please do.
Because I've worked for companies that have tried to become ISPs, and I've worked for a company that was an ISP until they got bought out. But and then they became something else. I'm not actually sure what they transformed them into, but that's a side note. So from an ISP standpoint, the equipment cost is so ridiculously high. You're talking Blade servers, which is like a $10,000 investment. You're talking Cisco Nexus switches, which is, you know, several thousands of dollars, like hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending on the newest, you know, age of the equipment, that sort of thing.
Sure.
You know, and so it doesn't stifle innovation, it increases it by forcing the big players to upgrade their infrastructure to try and outcompete all the smaller guys that are going to start up because of things like net neutrality. Now, I would love for there to be tax breaks for equipment costs, because the amount of money you have to put behind, pony up, should I say,
Yeah.
for starting data centers, essentially, because that's really what you're doing when you're becoming an ISP, is millions of dollars, literally.
Shouldn't.
And Brandon, when you say millions of dollars, are you talking about like a local ISP provider, or are you talking about somebody who would have like national reach, like be able to provide internet to, you know, coast to coast, essentially?
Well, if you're talking local, it's probably definitely hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you're talking national reach, millions minimum. I mean, some places spend way more than that if they got the funding. I mean, if you got the funding for, say, $1 billion, why the hell would you not put a good amount of that towards?
Well, this was actually a joke I was making earlier too, because I kind of understand this concept a little bit, and I was saying I don't know what Netflix's main server situation looks like, but I'd say it's on par with the NSA, like miles underground or something. I mean, it would have to be massive. I mean, streaming video doesn't compress that well, and I think that's really where your innovation would have to drive to with net neutrality. Is you would want to work on compression, right? I mean, that's really where your money's going to be. Is the better your compression technology, the more efficient your bandwidth is going to be.
Well, I mean, it's also kind of a pay-to-play sort of environment, because the more money you pony up as a consumer, the better bandwidth you get. And I think that net neutrality in some ways doesn't actually go far enough in that direction. Now, remember, I'm a liberal in transition, so like I'm not, I'm not 100%.
Come back to the light, man.
No, you won't. Trust me. As a right-leaning libertarian who was liberal most of his life, let me tell you, you will never come back to the light.
That is hilarious.
Anyway, what I was going to say was that you know, what we were talking about before, Siobhan, with the electricity usage type of situation, right now we pay for upload and download speeds. We don't pay for our data usage as far as hardline internet goes. You do on cell phones, or you have the bullshit.
Unless you have unlimited.
Or unless you have AT&T like I do, where unlimited means 22 gigs a month, and then you get throttled to fuck until you move on. But
22 gigs a month on your phone?
I'm saying when you go over that 22 gig situation, they throttle the shit out of you. Even
I mean, I used to have that, but it was like 2 gigs a month or something. Yeah, like that. And then they.
Well, I mean, that's
anyway. Let's not. But
that's kind of what I was getting at, was that we're not paying
a lot of 4K porn. Okay, just.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, like that's all I do. Is
he's got the he's got the VR
actually hosted to several
he wants
other
the visual.
He's got the dual processors on his phone.
That's right. And guys, 3D streams hard. Like anyway, yeah.
Pun intended.
Yeah, there's a pun there. Virtual reality porn is expensive and uses a lot of streaming data. Anyway,
I'm sure it does. Because I wouldn't know anything about that.
Of course not. We're all Puritans here.
That reminds me of one of the latest episodes of Ballers where they have that 3D. No, anyway, sorry.
Anyway, yes. Shout out to Ballers, great show.
Continue.
But what I was saying was that we don't pay hardline internet prices for how much data usage or bandwidth usage that we actually use. If we did, we'll be having this conversation. Like, I mean, Siobhan, say you're billed at, a half a cent per, I don't know, gigabyte, or hell, I don't even know how you want to put it out there, maybe $1 a gigabyte or something like that. But if you're burning 300 gigabytes a month or 400 gigabytes a month on your hard line, shouldn't you be paying for the bandwidth you're using? Because right now, the way the systems work is you're paying for an upload and download speed. And let's be friggin' honest, we never get what we actually pay for there.
It's never quite that. Yeah, it's like optimally you get that. It's
well, what they're giving you is kind of like a general average number, and it really isn't anything close to the reality. Because, I mean, say if you're on AT&T Uverse,
I feel sorry for you.
Which is a joke. It's absolutely
I feel bad.
Shite again. But AT&T Uverse, it's DSL. I mean, they claim it's not DSL, but
but they're full of shit. Trust me, I tried it and I couldn't even game on it. I was like, nope, we're done here. Give me back Charter.
Give me back Charter.
I got the power
Charter. Fuck it. But that's what I'm asking there is, would we be able to skip this net neutrality issue if we paid for our bandwidth usage instead of just this general idea that's average? Yeah, I mean,
that's how it was in Peru when I was down in Peru.
Yeah, what do you use? Yeah. I mean, we'll give you, you get on AT&T's other gigabit system that we've got around here where you have a gigabit per second.
I mean, really, as a consumer, that's not what I want. I want to pay a flat rate. I'm going to pay X amount. And I'm going to use as much as I want.
I mean, I want to do that with electricity too, but that's not how the world works. Like, I wish I paid $100 a month for electricity and I could fucking leave every light on and do whatever the hell I wanted all the time. But we adapt to the system we have.
I think there's a difference there that you can leave lights on and leave the house, right? And
people do it all the time.
Sure, yeah, even I do. Just to make it look like someone lives in my house most of the time because I'm not here.
That's fair, yeah.
But like with internet access, you're using it because you're physically present there, accessing the internet and downloading things.
Do you? Because I mean, I have a lot of big things I download that I just leave downloading all day.
Yeah, I bet you do.
No one downloads porn, Siobhan. You stream it now. Oh my gosh.
I wouldn't know, James. I like real life better.
Oh, okay. Anyway.
Okay. That aside,
okay, so
it's not just because you still decided to use that to download those files,
yes, of
right?
course, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
And when you're done downloading, you're done downloading.
Yeah,
right?
and whenever it finishes, it's done. Okay, cool.
But that's because you decided to use it for that, not just I'm just going to randomly stream things and not watch them.
No, that's not true either. Because my fucking girlfriend, really don't want to bitch about this. My girlfriend does all the time for her cat. She thinks her cat. Yes, I do. That's fine. But she thinks that her cat likes to watch TV. So she leaves. No, it is. No, she leaves the damn Netflix running
she's
while no one's home,
she's
so the
deliberately
cat can,
using it. I get that.
yeah, sure. But
My ex-wife was like that with a dog. I won't lie, right?
Which is the
I've seen it too.
Yeah.
which I just don't understand.
Because you don't want your dog to be lonely. Whatever.
I know that cat well. The cat would rather play with its toys than watch TV. The
I
cat's
know
not
that
watching
cat
TV.
well.
I do. I like the cat. I know it well.
There's some percentage of usage that you might be considered frivolous, but it's not the same thing as.
Bro, we log more Netflix hours for that damn cat than we do watching the thing. That's all I'm saying.
You don't get to decide. It doesn't count because it's a cat.
Yeah, I know.
That's the point. It's the same kind of thing.
Left it on for hours at a time is what I'm saying.
For a reason.
Get back on topic.
We can blame.
But that is on that. I'm sorry. That is the topic. Is what I'm asking is.
So
would it make more sense to charge for bandwidth used or data used than it would just for this flat rate, averaged idea? And would that help with these corporations that have this issue with net neutrality?
I don't know if it will really change anything, honestly.
I mean, isn't that their business concern though? Is that bandwidth being throttled or overused and trying to separate the bandwidth for customers? I mean, that's kind of what Comcast's beef.
I don't know. I mean, if they're saying it was a, and to come back to an earlier point, that people who were opponents of net neutrality are saying, oh, it was a solution for a problem that never existed. If there's no problem, why are they trying to get rid of the rule? I don't really see a good purpose of doing away with this. That if there was no problem, then they don't need to change anything,
Sure.
right? So I don't see how we need to be looking for a solution other than. I hate to say it, but what is the status quo?
Well, I'm sorry. What I was looking at is
fine.
what all the issues are aside from directly trying to price somebody out, like trying to get rid of Google Pay or whatever, or Google's wallet app.
Right.
Aside from those instances, what I'm seeing is the main issue seems to be allocation of bandwidth. Like, I mean, that seems to be the main argument is that services like Netflix, or back in the day when they did this to YouTube, and they did the same thing. You guys are eating all of our bandwidth and it's killing us, and it's making the user experience for all of our customers combined shitty. So you're not.
But I don't think that's accurate though.
I don't think it is either. Let's ask Brandon because he actually probably knows the answer to this question. Hey, Brandon, you want to tell us?
I was hoping I'd go invisible. So generally, my response to such a argument would be. Yeah, why don't you spend more money on infrastructure and then you fucking solve that problem now, don't you? Like, it's really not that hard.
Which is
what
we're paying for access.
I agree.
So
build
Brandon,
infrastructure.
We're using infrastructure that in a lot of cases is still like 10, 15, 20 years old.
Yes.
There's still parts of America where infrastructure is, shite. I mean,
HughesNet exists for a reason.
Okay,
well,
so Brandon,
AOL still selling DSL now in 2017.
Okay, so my understanding is that if you have fiber or have at least fiber running to your neighborhood, then the whole bandwidth sharing issue is not a problem. It's really
because it's dedicated lines. Yes.
Right. So
Not
as long as you have like fiber, where you have like a trunk running to your neighborhood, and then you can kind of branch off of that, you don't have that problem.
Most
it's
of us
really
don't.
only at places that refuse to like invest in that kind of infrastructure. I mean, it really is like putting a low voltage electricity line on your property and being like, sorry, we can't give you enough electricity to power all of your shit at the same time. You're bad. Like, you're going to have to run like one thing after another. Don't try to run the hot water heater at the same time as the dryer.
Totally, and I
like
I
an
feel
internet
that,
brownout.
but you are talking to a group of 3 people here that
No,
live in
dude,
rural.
I'm asking Brandon because he actually probably knows the answer to the question.
Oh,
I
sure.
don't want your opinion, James.
Oh my god.
All right, so just kind of reshape the question again, so that way I get a general idea of kind of the overview of where I need to be hitting the points here.
Sure thing. All right. So my understanding generally is that as long as you have, the appropriate infrastructure, say like a fiber trunk to a neighborhood or something like that, you don't have this issue where a couple of users are hogging all of the bandwidth. Is that true?
So what you would want in an ideal situation, if you're actually giving a shit about like building decent infrastructure, is, which most of these companies, let's be honest, they're not.
It's not. It's expensive.
Well, heaven forbid their CEO can't buy the fifth house.
Right? No, that golden.
You sound like a
umbrella
socialist, man.
stand is like,
Righteous
oh,
reference.
that's-
Righteous reference. I love it. But okay.
So, yeah, the general idea would be that by doing dedicated lines in conjunction with having good data center infrastructure,
when you
which
say
all this is
dedicated lines,
expensive.
sorry, what do you mean when you say dedicated lines?
So what you would want in an ideal situation for the people who could pay for it, that is. So I do think to some extent that you would have to pay more and want to get dedicated lines.
You do.
I mean, I'm not necessarily opposed to that idea. So that basically means you would have one line going into your house, straight into your router, and then that line goes back all the way through however they've ran it until it reaches their data center into a dedicated port on their switch, router, whatever networking hardware that's on the edge of their infrastructure.
Okay,
in an
so
ideal world, though, if you're doing this correctly, you would have actually two dedicated lines, one failover, so that if one goes and goes away, then the other line takes over. But you know, you'd have to pay extra for that.
You're gonna have to break that down for me a little bit more. So, all right, so just like elementary school style, say we've got a neighborhood. Like, how would you wire that? You know, using what in order to ensure that the whole bandwidth hogging problem isn't an issue?
So how you would wire it is, now I'm not super familiar with actually laying lines. That's not what I did.
Can't imagine. Not taking pictures.
Well, I mean, a short, fat nerd doesn't lay lines. Sorry.
That
was
hey, manlet is the preferred nomenclature these days.
Manlet?
Yeah.
I'm not even gonna touch that. I'm not even gonna go there. Not even gonna go there. So,
But
that was a joke, but please continue.
So in an ideal world, you would kind of use, I'm going to use PVC pipe as kind of just sort of something I could reference in my head for how you do it, but it would actually be something much bigger than a PVC pipe. Okay. You essentially run a pipe, and you run all the cables through said pipe, and then you'd separate those pipes out to each individual house.
Okay, so you've got a trunk.
Assuming that they have the money to pay for it, of course.
Okay, so you've got like a trunk, like a bundled trunk of wires, right? And then you would branch one of those wires out to each house. Okay.
Yeah. That's expensive as shit, by the way.
Well, I'm sure it is, but
sounds like the same.
The diameter of those lines is roughly the size of a basketball, if not bigger.
Yeah, definitely.
They're huge.
It would be something pretty decent size, and I mean, Chattanooga is already doing this.
Yes, Chattanooga,
and they're doing it really, really well.
They do.
In an ideal world, you would want to contract out to somebody like Google Fiber to do that, since they're the people who.
This is the thing I wanted to say earlier before we got into this, is that, you know, the three of us sitting here, we live in a rural area of Tennessee. Like where I live, we're talking about running AT&T's gigabit line, but it ain't there yet. We run off of hubs, and we get much smaller cable lines that run to us, and we can achieve rates of like 50 megabytes a second, and that's pretty much my average where I live, and which is great because even 5 years ago it was around 20. You know, most of this country exists the way I exist, unless you live in a city. In a city, you have neighborhoods, and you can run gigabit lines, and you can run these basketball diameter size fiber optic lines that are massive, that cost a lot of money to even input. I mean, just a spool of this goes, you can fill up a semi truck trailer with maybe 500 yards of line. I mean, this shit is expensive and takes a lot. It weighs a lot. It's huge. I mean, and normally your city is investing in this. They're helping to subsidize the cost.
Hey, James, Brandon's trying to talk, and he might actually know more about this than any of us.
I know a fair.
I really don't. I don't know why everybody thinks
I
that
actually-
I actually
I
know
actually know a fair
things
amount
because
about-
like
You said
my
stuff
head is
that
a
we didn't
mile up my
understand.
ass.
You said stuff we didn't understand before we started, so we all figured you were the expert.
I was gonna say, I do actually know the infrastructure.
I mean, I'm probably closer maybe than some people, but you know, I've not been in the tech industry more than 5 years. So
That's 5 years
You know.
more than all of us.
yeah, a good veteran tech person would give you much better information. But so you in an ideal world would want the government to, and I when I mean the government, I mean like the actual federal level, not the municipalities. Because the problem with the municipalities is they subsidize the cost of those lines going in, but in return they give exclusivity to those companies
This is the way
by
our
giving them
area
leases.
works.
So in an ideal situation, what you would want is the federal government to subsidize that, and by giving a better cost ratio deal to those companies instead of actually you would nix the exclusivity, because I don't want any exclusivity of any kind in any municipality. I don't care how rural. That stifles innovation and competition more than anything else, because what you get in the end is mediocrity.
Mm-hmm. I mean, well, Chattanooga is doing exactly that, but they're trying to do it right, and they've done a great job. I mean, Chattanooga is one of the fastest internet cities in the country, if not the world. But that's in downtown Chattanooga. Like that's actually within the city limits of Chattanooga. Outside of which, it's still basically the same thing we have here.
It's real quick, yeah.
Yeah, it gets rural really quick, and we're doing the same thing. And I apologize. I just actually have friends who work in this industry and do this, and we talk about it all the time.
Right.
And they're the guys that lay the lines and do this kind of thing, and they're contracted to do it.
So it seems like this is definitely like a geography issue where if you live in a very concentrated area, then the odds of you having multiple options, and I mean, I have a fiber trunk that literally runs like 10 feet outside of my door that runs down the main street in this area. And like,
you're in Houston, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a huge area. Like, and we're only like, what, 40 minutes south of Nashville or so? I mean, traffic depending.
I usually tell people that.
But doesn't this boil down to a rural-urban divide?
Well, and it does. And that's kind of what I was trying to get at, too, is that, you know, a large portion of America is rural. You have to look at it that way. And a large portion of our population lives in rural areas. I mean, it's basically half and half. Half is in the city, and they're in small, concentrated cities. And then the rest of us are spread out over, you know, God's country or whatever.
Right.
You want to refer
so
to it.
if I can bring this back just a second, sort of to I guess to answer what could be formulated as a challenge about, say, Netflix during peak hours is usually what would you say 37% of all broadband usage in the United States, you know, during this time. Yeah, I mean that's a ton of data, sure.
Yeah.
But it's not actually causing any service problems for anybody. If anyone's having, you know, problems with having, you know, a good access to broadband or to the internet, well, it's based on their location.
It did before. We're getting better about our infrastructure in general, because like Brandon said, we're about 10 or 15 years behind the curve as far as general infrastructure in America goes.
Right. And so, but again, I guess just to address, you know, these, I have like a hypothetical interlocutor here,
sure,
you know, who's arguing about this because they didn't come.
Yeah, don't know where they're at.
They didn't make it out. I'm not trying to bag on anybody because I don't know what their actual opinions are on stuff. So,
hey man, it's the empty chair argument. Go ahead and make it.
It's the empty chair.
Ooh, can we Clint Eastwood this?
Oh God, he sounds like.
Hey man, that's like defense attorney 101. Empty chair. They're not here because they can't defend themselves.
No, yeah, that's great.
I said it.
That one's on Siobhan.
And it's true.
It's true, though. Seriously.
It is so true.
Defense Lawyer 101. They ain't here because they just can't say anything. So we're going to use it.
Well, I mean, heaven forbid they couldn't, you know, do a little bit of research and then find out they're wrong. You know, they have to live in the world of Fox News and the alt-right. I mean,
you can't assert that in a court of law. Like, you can't give them their.
This ain't the court of law. I don't have to give a shit. This is a live stream. I don't have to care.
Brandon, I like this guy.
The more Brandon's hanging out, the
Brandon,
better.
you're good people, dude. But
Fuck the rules of evidence.
What the hell
I
am
do what I
saying?
want. Mistrial, motherfucker. Mistrial.
Oh, James.
Essentially,
James,
anyway.
Just go to the EFF website. There you go. It's right
Like
there.
a fish out of water here.
I'm just kidding. I'm really not trying to support it at all. I'm full Title II with this shit. I like net neutrality personally.
Yeah, we
Well,
really don't have any.
it is a utility. Come on. I mean,
Yeah.
It is a
nobody can-
utility. I mean, clearly it's a utility. 95% of this country uses the internet on a regular basis. It's a motherfucking utility.
This is the
Well, when society's relying upon it, it's a utility.
Well,
That's
not
my
only
rule.
that, but
Society's relying
Yeah.
upon it, it's a
Yeah.
utility.
Well, it's also
Even among conservatives, I mean, it just.
Hang on.
Sorry,
Siobhan
I'm sorry.
wants to say something.
Thank you, James. I mean, it has taken. He's so proud of himself. Look at that. I know.
Brownie points.
I will say that, like, all of this sexual harassment and mansplaining talk has turned James into maybe not so much of a knuckle dragging cretin.
God, man.
Holy shit.
It's so hard to see.
Get
It's so
wrecked.
hard to see. Like I don't equate myself with that, but it's so hard to fucking see all the time. And I'm like,
I can't even
God,
talk
do
about
I behave like this? Is this me? Is this me? Do I do this? Am I this guy? Like, oh no, I don't want to be that
James,
guy.
I think you should rewatch some of our other Hangouts and then ask yourself if you're that guy. I'm serious. I love you. I really
Holy
do.
Wait. I'm gonna come back on this with the hot take. This
Oh,
coming from the
I bet you
person who
are.
actually told me to be quiet so that Brandon, who could come up and say, I really don't know anything about infrastructure, to the guy who actually cares about this and deals in it.
Do you know anything about infrastructure?
I do
Or is
actually.
it all hearsay that someone else has told you?
Well, I thought the rules of
This is-
evidence
this
didn't
is-
apply.
Fine, right?
I thought we
These
just.
All right. I actually did have a point
Like
that
a knife fight that they just need to have at some point.
Yeah,
I
but
just,
keep in
I just want
mind that
everybody.
what
I
you-
want everybody to know that I love Siobhan and I respect her opinion.
Oh.
I'd like to hear what she has to say.
I appreciate that. Thank you, James. So
Well,
what
I
I'm
mean, keep
going-
in mind, I'm a data center engineer, not not a
Not a
private
lawyer?
laning person. You stick me in the data
You're not-
center
you're
so
not
I
on
don't
the
interact with people.
I think that Brandon was probably being, falsely, self-effacing there. He probably does know more about it than any of us do.
Ooh,
So, which
are
is
we-
why I said that. But anyway, James, had I known you were such a guru about like laying line, I totally would not have interrupted you. Just throwing that
Well,
out.
I mean, all he cares about is laying pipe. Come on.
I'm sorry. What I meant to say is I have two friends that both do it. I have two friends that are both like actually
You know-
big into this.
what
And like they talk about it all the damn time. And it's like a huge conversation we have. And they bitch and bitch and bitch about how there are not enough federal subsidies and things to keep up with this infrastructure. And like it's a conversation we have all the time because they are extremely leftist and they really, 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 really hate the way the system works right now.
I think it is a fair statement to say that there is not enough federal money that goes into infrastructure generally. I mean,
Well, I mean, it would
bridges,
probably
everything.
require us to cut in very key areas in order to pay for the infrastructure because of how far behind we really are.
Are you
We really are.
saying the defense budget? Did I hear that?
Oh no.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I didn't come out and say it, but yes.
Wait. Fun fact. Look this one up. If you live near a military base, like say Clarksville or something like that, your internet is fucking baller.
But it is.
You have access to all of
Because
it.
the
You can
military
just
paid
come off
for
the trunk
their
line.
infrastructure, and they didn't
Yeah.
care about the cost.
Goddamn right. Yep, and that's the way it works.
Because we all
Well,
pay.
they probably, gave it to the highest bidder. Well, not the highest bidder, but close.
And they
The
got
one
rid
who's
of
gonna
Are
change
you
order the
kidding?
shit out
There
of
was
that.
a no bid contract. What are you talking about?
Are we talking about Puerto Rico already?
No, actually, we're talking about the way America works with defense contracting in general. There's no such thing as a
That was a
bid
joke, James.
contract.
It was a joke. Anyway, back to the point that I attempted to make before we got off on the tangent. So in my mind, this really is very much like electricity in that, I mean, so you can't necessarily store electricity and just kind of dole it out, right? Like the most efficient way you can, but the most efficient way to do it is to turn on the engine and just pump it out as it is needed, right? Which is why you have energy traders who work 24/7, literally
Yes.
in the middle of the night, so that they can turn on essentially the generator and pump electricity through the grid.
Yes,
as needed,
yes. Okay.
right?
Yep. I mean, yeah,
It's
it's
got
a
a
base.
whole
It's a
ton.
basic consumer end thing of things, and as a utility provider, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Right. So you're really only limited by your ability, like your capacity of your grid, right?
Unless
And
you have $10,000 that can afford a power wall, at which point, fuck it, you can store electricity for a month.
Okay, James, we're gonna go back on subject.
I heard another great analogy actually the other day compared thinking about what could happen if we do away with net neutrality rules. Is imagine you're making a phone call to somebody and you can be charged more or less or have your connection interrupted or garbled depending on who you're talking to and how much that company decides how important that phone call is you're making.
You mean in possibly where they're located and how much bandwidth it takes to send the message? You mean like long distance phone calls for the history of telecoms until recently?
No, I'm saying who you call. You could be calling your neighbor next door.
Oh,
maybe that neighbor is your doctor. Maybe that call is very important. They've decided to place a premium on.
Why do they put the premium on?
So they can make more money.
No, but what was the standard for doing so? Because
they can find a way to make more money while also invading your privacy.
Well, come on, privacy is dead. Get over it. I mean, that's what the CEO of Sun Microsystems said, like back in 01 or.
But this is one of the things that they can do. They can
Stop
look.
shitting
They
on my
can look at
VPN.
these. They can look at these data packets. The ISP can look at these data packets, see where they're going to. And if they want to place priorities on internet for porn or whatever it is that you're trying to do, right? It's like, oh, look at him. He's looking at porn.
Everybody
we want to charge more for this. You know,
Well,
they can
he's
do that.
going to
We can
Pornhub.com.
follow your ass back. Like that's what this can come back to.
Right.
And I don't think the boogeyman because they already tried to do it.
Yeah, which is like full circle the argument of like, if there isn't necessarily enough bandwidth for everyone to share, they shouldn't get to pick and choose who gets bandwidth.
Agreed.
Like, it's like an electricity provider saying, hey, we don't have enough electricity to provide electricity to everyone for everything they want to do. So we're going to shut down your hot water heater and like his dryer or whatever, because we're going to prioritize what you use that commodity for.
You know, they actually do that a little bit in reality, right? Like, especially out west.
They
Yes,
can't
when there are issues with rolling
possibly
blackouts.
tell what you're using your electricity for once it goes.
I might actually have to debate you on that. There's actually a way you can.
Yes, and I was going to say, yes, they do that. They do that when they have rolling blackouts and brownouts and whatnot out west in California and all of this, especially related to droughts because they use hydroelectricity to create electricity. Yes, they do limit your electricity usage, and they will cut your ass off.
Yeah, which
if you
is
use too much, not, you know.
Yeah, you're using too much.
Like a drought.
Just like bandwidth, you're using too much, so you're cut off.
It's not too much.
Hey, let her talk.
Sorry.
Yes, please, I'm sorry.
It's not that you're using too much over the course of a day. It's that everyone is drawing on the same line at the same time, and there isn't enough flow through the pipeline to get everyone everything they need.
Doesn't this come back to infrastructure cost?
It does.
Thank you. Yes, it does.
I think it goes right into infrastructure too.
I mean, yeah, no, I've been through brownouts before, like when they have a real shit winter and it's an area that doesn't have a real shit winter. You know, like when you're in the shower and all of a sudden, like, fucking power goes off and it's 20 degrees outside and you're like, well, guess I'm going to go to school with wet hair.
I didn't need heat anyway, right?
Right, exactly. I can't dry my hair. It's 20 degrees outside. Might as well. Why not? I'm just going to go to school with wet hair, whatever.
Yeah, fuck it.
YOLO.
It's like they can't say you can use electricity for your hair dryer, but not your lights. Like they just turn off your electricity generally because there's not enough
because
of it
you're
to go
because
around.
you're using too much. Yes, exactly.
Everyone, well, not because you yourself are using too much, but
because the whole area is using too much.
Demand on the grid.
Yes, right. yes. So you're absolutely right. Yes, but it's your area, your neighborhood, your whatever is drawing too much power, or you're using
but it's not you individually, and it's not based on what you individually are using that electricity for.
Like, no, of course.
It sounds like we're almost all in agreement.
My hair dryer.
Caveat that we need improved infrastructure.
Yeah.
Agreement is not. Yeah, I wish there was someone who.
Yeah, well, how do we pay for it is going to be the good question.
Well, they got rid of earmarks. they got rid of earmarks for what it's worth how many years ago, or maybe they would have been earmarked by now. You know, it's something that would have been earmarked 15
I
years ago.
gotta revert back to Brandon on this. Actually, yes, they can pretty much tell by the wattage and what you're using your wattage for.
Well, that was kind of my point. And there's a device that actually reads unique identifier information that tells them exactly what they need to know as far as what you got plugged in.
Yep, they know when they know when the hair dryer.
It's just expensive as shit to do on a massive scale, like
Right.
say the
But
power
if
grid.
say they had that installed at everybody's house, would they be able to, for instance, direct power just to certain things?
Like sockets or whatever, like one outlet.
Perhaps, maybe. I'm not certain.
I mean, but it
Probably not.
bases it identifies what you're using the electricity for based on the wattage, right?
I think yes.
So if you're using two things that are 100 watts, it can't differentiate between them, right?
Your hair dryer is well over 1,000 watts.
James. This is a hypothetical, so shut your fucking mouth.
Oh, I'm
Sorry,
sorry.
that
Goddamn.
was rude. That was
I was gonna say I just dropped some
James,
reason on
James,
your
you're my
ass. My
friend.
bad.
But I gotta say, I love it when people
that's
talk
not.
bad to you.
James, like it can tell that certain things are higher, like obviously certain things consume more power than others, right?
Yes.
But it can't necessarily tell, like if you have 50 watts coming into your house, or it can't tell what you're using them for.
Yeah, that's true. You're very much.
Exactly. So that's the thing. This is different because they can tell what you are using your bandwidth for. If you're Google uses 50 watts and Netflix uses 50 watts, they can tell.
Well, it's not that hard. Just based on source and destination IP, and boom, there you go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's not necessarily that they're it's not that they're necessarily controlling how much juice is coming into your house. They're controlling what you can use the juice to power.
Yes. So like they can look at it and say, oh hell yeah, you're in the Netflix IP bandwidth, or you're in the IP range of Netflix. Like, yeah, we know you're fucking on Netflix.
And that's the problem. If I want to use my 150 watts to power my hair dryer, you shouldn't have a say in that. If I want to use it to power something else, then you shouldn't have a say in that. You know, and so like that's the problem with the non-net neutrality situation, is that they're saying, yeah, sure, you can use 150 watts, but we care what you use it for.
Basically, yeah, this non-net neutrality situation.
No,
the idea is that you have restricted content to different IPs, and that you get bandwidth based on what you pay for each one of these ranges of IPs. We already know you're all up in Netflix. Siobhan, all you do is watch fucking Gilmore Girls. We get it.
I've actually never seen Gilmore Girls.
I'm joking. It was sorry. Actually,
is that because she's white?
No, actually, it was
racist.
It's actually because she's very argumentative, like my sister, and my sister loves Gilmore Girls. That's her thing. But anyway, that's cool. Anyway, so yes, we get it, Siobhan. Gilmore Girls. It's all you do. 20 hours a day. Gilmore Girls is streaming. We fucking get it. Your dogs watch it. We know. We know, Siobhan. We fucking know. Okay.
I'll be honest. My dogs watch more TV than I do.
Thank you. Knew it. Boom.
Netflix. They're in the back of my house. Like they don't watch TV very much, but like I can honestly tell you that I've turned on my TV maybe like 10 times in the past 3 months.
Hot take: scientifically, dogs cannot see a television outside of blurs.
Actually, that's not true.
Oh,
retort.
The scientist is going to weigh in.
Yeah, no, I will tell you that it depends on the refresh rate of the screen. So it's like lower intelligence creatures require a higher refresh rate before they can see things. And I can tell you that anecdotally, in my experience, this has been true because my dog used to only go apeshit when he could hear a horse on the TV. Mm-hmm. He couldn't actually see it. He doesn't really care about other dogs, but like horses, whoo, just goes bad shit crazy.
She's over here like, but I now have that 4K,
I do,
240 hertz refresh rate, and now that motherfucker can see them horses on TV. He's about that life. He's about that horse barking life.
He does. When it's on mute, he goes nuts.
No, my dog will watch TV.
Yeah, we had a dog who loved baseball.
Ooh, actually, I do like that data. That's crunchy data.
It really did used to be just about the noise. Like he couldn't see. He would kind of look at it, but you could tell he couldn't really tell. It wasn't until the noise came in that he would like go absolutely batshit. But now, even if it's on mute, he can see. It really.
Hot take.
Siobhan watches a hot take.
Hot
Siobhan
take.
watches a lot of westerns.
Westworld. Sorry.
No, Westworld's
Anyway,
awesome, but also if you're not fucking with Godless, you are fucking up.
I need to watch both of those shows.
Godless is so good.
But,
Westworld's
I think-
better, but Godless is good.
I think it's probably
Good.
maybe not a terrible time to wrap here. I think
Are
we've gone to all the hypotheticals. We climbed the ivory tower.
This is what we talk about the internet.
We're good. All right, we're good.
Yeah, I think we're all pretty fine with keeping net neutrality. We're probably going to lose it anyway.
Yeah, we are.
Because
yeah,
none of us get to vote on this,
yeah,
right?
no, we've all said a lot of things, but apparently 100 million Russians weighed in too. Who
Yeah.
knows?
And Ajit Pai.
Oh yeah. Well, before we
Well,
wrap,
remember, Ajit Pai is an ex-FC or ex-Verizon
Thank you for bringing that
Attorney,
up.
yes, he is,
um,
and he.
lawyer. So
He's a
I
whore.
mean,
Got it.
So I'll probably go back to
You can
Verizon
also-
in a
yeah,
few
he
years.
will go back to Verizon in a few years and reap
collect
the
fat checks,
rewards.
yeah.
money.
While the rest of us get screwed.
well, I'm sure he's got fat stacks already. I mean, come on, they're paying him
No,
like pretty
no,
regularly.
get fatter,
no,
man.
you'd be surprised. They really don't pay too much. He's getting most of it in kickbacks and probably
So
stock
depressing.
options and under the table
Whoa,
shit. that he gets.
wait.
Well, I mean, think about how much you'd make in stock options with FC or with net neutrality going away. I mean,
Yeah, I was
Woo,
going
this
to
is a
say.
good
so
time to
he's probably
invest in
kicking in some
ISPs. I'd do it.
bitcoins or something.
Marshall
You can't track.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
Sorry,
this is-
Siobhan. Hang on, Siobhan had something to say 'cause she was
Oh, I'm
about to
sorry.
weigh in with that hot take.
Yeah, sorry. No, yeah. I guess. Yeah, what was the last thing we were talking about before we got distracted by the fact that maybe this guy has a vested interest in net neutrality going away?
Dogs watching TV.
Dogs
what
watching
dogs
TV.
watching-
That's a very
that's the most important
I think
part.
specifically, we were talking about how much you love westerns, which is cool. 'Cause I like
you know, my dad would be like so thrilled if I liked westerns, but that's really not my bag. Like Westworld.
So how does your dog recognize the sound of horses on TV versus the vision of horses on TV?
Game of Thrones, bitch.
Nah.
Damn.
There aren't that many horses in Game of Thrones in
Are you
general. The
serious?
battle scenes and shit.
Oh
Come
my
on.
God. Okay.
In every scene. In,
That is a different story for a different day.
yeah.
But we were
Let's not
talking
do
about
that.
it was the Russian bot thing. Okay.
Oh.
So
Yeah, basically, what it like was it? John Oliver had a website like "Go FCC yourself" or something like that to try and get direct attention to this issue, and like it got like overrun
Yeah, that was
by,
like a year ago, right?
no.
No,
I actually
was it this
posted something
season?
recently about most of the comments being.
It was earlier this year.
It
I
was
think.
net neutrality. He had a big
Yeah,
thing on
it was
neutrality.
about
I feel
net
like it was
neutrality.
months ago. I remember watching
Yeah.
it a long time ago.
Yeah, well, anyway, I rewatched the episode last night.
Oh yeah, I was gonna
And
say
the
it was
whole thing.
pretty
What happened?
ways ago.
Basically, he created a website to I guess generate attention, so that basically to funnel like the emails and comments and things like this at the FCC, so you can contact them directly through the website. You found a way, so basically to like streamline the process
Yeah.
of getting through to them.
Okay.
And
Instead of playing their
it got like
comment.
overrun by like the little Russian bots or something like that. I don't know all the details on it.
No.
No.
The FCC
Oh,
said
Did I get it
one-
wrong? Okay, go ahead.
Brandon, I'm sorry.
Yeah, one way you can kind of make it painful for the FCC to do what they're trying to do now in the general process overall is there is a direct phone number that you can just call and then a few options in a menu and then a certain case number that you have to mention when you're talking to them, and you can kind of make your voice
Give him a comment.
heard.
There's also an
Um,
electronic submission system, which
There
actually
is.
is true for all federal agencies, where you can submit
Comments.
like online. You submit comments. So I mean, just as like a quick refresher for people who didn't spend like an entire semester in legislative and administrative power and procedure like I did.
Hey, girl.
God, I wish I could get that year of my life back.
No, you don't. No, you don't. You
It
need to
was
know
actually-
that shit.
It was
That's real.
unfortunately like
God damn.
one of like the 3 most useful classes I ever took in law school, but God, I wish I could get that time back. Anyway, so like the way regulatory agencies work, and I'm sure you all know this, but just for the people out back, agencies with rulemaking authorities still have to comply with due process. So they put out what's called a notice of it. Like sometimes they actually put out an advance notice of proposed rulemaking, and then they put out a notice of proposed rulemaking. And then there is what's called a notice and comment period, which is where the public and industry get to weigh in on this sort of thing, which is where the Russian spamming issue comes into play, is that apparently the vast majority of anti-net neutrality comments came from spam accounts.
Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
Yes.
There we
And,
go.
Right.
I got the story wrong. Go ahead.
Right. And so what's important about that is that these regulatory agencies use, I mean, they don't, when they say, here's what we're thinking about, they don't give you a proposed rule. They kind of give you the proposed substance of what they're thinking about doing. And so they incorporate comments from people and from the industry and change their thought process depending on the agency. It's like a very much an iterative process where they do really very engage with industry and change what they're thinking about doing. And they work with industry and commentators to actually formulate the rules. So when you have all of these spam comments coming in, the risk is that the federal agency is putting a lot of emphasis on things that are fake, and they're incorporating that into their final rule. And it really is like a situation where you have a direct line to legislative rulemaking authority as a citizen. And if it's a spam comment, then they're incorporating kind of these spam comments into the rule.
And I think it was a state attorney general who blew this up. I think it was the New York State Attorney General, if I remember correctly. But somebody blew it up and basically saying that they're utilizing almost, or at least a majority, if not almost an entirety of Russian fake troll accounts, and they showed that millions of these comments that are being upvoted or whatever the hell the process is, that most of them are Russian fake troll accounts. I mean, that's the consideration, and that's the concern, is that Jesus Christ, man, we can't stop this. Like, this is a huge issue for us.
The scariest part about it is that this, the whole Russian troll things, is all based upon, like, what I would kind of call AI limited, which is kind of like a, it would be it's a custom coded server built to do this. Like, that's pretty scary. If AI limited could do this, imagine what the real AI, which is coming probably in about 5 years.
But I don't know about that.
Spoof is, I think what he's saying is that it's good enough to spoof real human comments.
It is.
It's not necessarily that easy to determine what's real and what's not.
And I think, Siobhan, you were telling us this, is reading these comments from these Russian troll accounts or whatever, they read like great English. They look colloquial, they fit well. You don't look at it and say, oh, look, troll account, or like, oh, look, AI. They read well. And I think part of that is that the fact that they actually use these large ministries or propaganda machines of people who are educated in English, who are doing this in real time, speaking English, typing these things out. This isn't just a machine making this shit up. These are real people who understand English, who are typing these things and being paid to do it as saboteurs.
I think we're conflating, so that may be my fault because we did talk about this beforehand, but I think we're conflating two issues. What you're talking about, I think, is the Russian interference in the election and kind of the drive and divisiveness. And those spam, like Facebook things, I think you were probably right, were actually drafted by people who are native English speakers based on the syntax, content, whatever. What I'm specifically referring to with net neutrality is actual spam that's created by a bot. And so the way that
so it's AI, like it's not.
Well, yeah, that's what I was talking about when I said AI limited. Right. I mean, these
Holy
are
shit.
So, these are custom coded bots, using scripts to do this, and it's not hard to code this. It's really, I mean, it's getting easier and easier.
I wish it was harder.
It requires.
Don't we all?
Wait, hang on. Like my
Right,
mind needs to wrap
so
around this. So
if
like
it-
these are
if it
English
gives you
speakers
some-
that wrote the script, and then they're kind of.
If it gives you some context, the way that these spam bots were discovered is the way that they used the English language. So it was like vocabulary and syntax and things like that. And so
Right.
it's passable as basically someone who doesn't have a great grasp of the English language / like how to use words in a sentence. Just throwing
Looks
it
like a
out there.
grandparent on Facebook. Or
Holy
something.
Yeah,
fucking
that's-
shit.
I think that's a really good. A really good
Well, I mean, and may I mind you, here's the even more interesting part, just from my side, being somebody who's in cybersec. And that this is going to basically make the conversation kind of detour just for a second. But those bots are the same kind of, well, they're different function, but same kind of programming logic that you would use if you were, say, creating an online bot to scan for vulnerabilities or try and attack websites automatically. You have no idea how many IP addresses I block doing that on my website automatically. It's absurd.
Well, wait. So
And they're coming from everywhere: India, Russia,
Yep.
North
Siobhan,
Korea,
your
you name
body
it.
language right there is exactly how I feel.
So so Brandon, when you say that, you mean that you have some sort of cybersecurity script set up to recognize that kind of incoming traffic and block it?
So when they cause errors on the website, which they naturally will, because if you're doing that kind of thing, in most cases, you're going to cause either a 404 page not found, if you've ever seen those.
Yes.
The bane of my existence.
I'm over the age of 12. I've seen those.
Oh yeah.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I think that like how you cause those is a different story, and maybe Brandon can elaborate on that in a minute. I'll let him finish.
Yeah, how you cause those is if it's a missing resource or something related to that.
So why
So
is it
if I was looking for gate.php and it wasn't there, then there you go. I get a 404.
so why is it that a spam bot would cause that or trigger?
Because he's looking for something very specific. Like if I'm trying to refer back to another website and I want a particular script to do that, like say, I'll give you an example. Site.ru, by the way, don't go there. It's malware. But site.ru was used as a referrer constantly in like my contact me page and stuff like that. And so I auto block that because I don't have the time to screw around with blocking these people manually. Do you realize how much time out of my day that takes?
Okay, so when you say they referred back to that, it was like people or bots contacting your website that would kind of redirect you towards that other site that you knew was right. Okay,
sort of. Yeah. So I mean, that's the easiest way to put it.
just trying to break it down.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I speak in techies.
No, that's awesome. Yes, no, that's good. We need this.
So, so theoretically, would there be a way for a government agency like, I don't know, the FCC to discern these kind of spam comments from real live people?
Potentially, but that requires a lot more security work than they're probably willing to do, because let's be honest, the government's lazy and they don't really give a shit. So
and not unless you're an alphabet agency that actually involves, the Department of Defense. Otherwise, no one gets
but even then, like, let's be real, they don't. All right.
Oh well,
we're not even gonna go there. We'll go there some other time.
Yeah,
but
criminal prosecution in general, they're cool with that. They'll spend money on it, but
Well, yeah, but they still can't crack an iPhone.
Actually, they can.
Yeah, they can.
It just depends. Yes, they can. Actually, that San Bernardino thing was a Tennessee, Nashville Metro cop who cracked it, and then
cracked the password.
No. Cracked the encryption for it, and then Apple went, "Oh shit, let's update." And then that guy got a job at the FBI immediately. I know him personally. Yeah, he cracked the encryption on it. I mean, that was his thing, and then he
Sure about
immediately went FBI.
About that?
Of course, now we're at the same point where Apple has increased their encryption and keeps doing the
I
same
think
thing
we're
with
actually
updates.
pretty far off.
Well, that's kind
Everything
of
here
like
at
the
this point.
whole anti-intelligence agency kind of thing that the free market's trying to do, is trying to one-up them to make it that much harder for intelligence
Well, I love it.
agencies.
And I mean, they do it with every update, but I'm just saying the particular instance I'm talking about, the San Bernardino thing, it was actually a guy who worked for Nashville Metro that cracked it. And the FBI immediately hired him and brought his ass in. And he was
I'm
like,
sure they
yeah,
did.
he was like 5 months from retiring, full pension from Nashville
Wow.
Metro. And they were like, we'll give you all of that as FBI credit. You can retire from the FBI. And he was like, okay, I'm going.
He should just
Wow.
wait 5 months, retire, and then go work for the FBI and collect double. That's what they all do.
No. Well, yeah, the
curious,
FBI
that's
retirement.
actually what
The
they
FBI retirement's a hell of a lot better than Nashville Metro.
So what? I mean, you get double, seriously. I mean, that's what they do. You ever met like the blue coats at a federal every single federal courthouse has blue coats, and they're all retired local cops. They're
Yes,
they're,
the
they're
bailiffs.
collecting.
Yeah.
No, it's the blue coats who take your cell phone.
Yeah, the fucking their
The guy
version of
who
bailiffs or whatever.
No, they run you through the X-rays at the very front of the room. They're not bailiffs.
Oh,
bailiffs are
sorry.
FBI.
Sorry. Yeah, there's security. Yeah.
Their bailiffs are the marshals. So no, but yeah.
Oh yeah, it might be.
Surprised it's not
I know what you're
I spent a
saying.
lot of time with those guys on Monday. Actually, I had to go into the courthouse like 4 times for. I was trying to get a passport.
Anyway, okay, we need to wrap this damn thing
Yeah,
up,
yeah.
and we can have this fun
It was
conversation.
my tangent that brought it in.
By the
Yeah.
way, we don't
If
have
that's
to.
what- if that's what it takes, I'm cool with
This
it.
isn't going to have to end when we end the broadcast. But
Yeah, we can keep going.
we got.
I think we're all in favor of net neutrality here.
Yeah.
If there are some people,
Oh shit! I forgot to ask. Okay, sorry, this is my bad. I meant to bring this up like literally 15 minutes ago. Then we got distracted by Game of Thrones. So there's this one.
Horses.
I know. We'll talk about. Well,
I'm
maybe-
so close.
let's talk about it after. I'm sorry. Continue. Just wrap it up, David.
That's
Do your
fine.
thing.
Yeah, I was just. I guess James is.
I would assume I'm
is
not.
getting a
James needs another glass of
James is
scotch.
getting cut off, and it's not possible to cut him off. He's a bottomless pit.
Or an iron horse.
Yeah, Iron Horse. There you go. Yeah, so I think it sounds like there's nobody here who can really defend any good reason to repeal these rules or to change who's in charge of them or let the free market decide or anything else like this. It all sounds pretty disastrously bad. If there are people who disagree with us, I invite them to come back around because there were some other folks we were talking to before the broadcast that had an interest. Unfortunately, they weren't able to come on. So this ended up being a little bit more insular than I had intended. But maybe we can revisit this. But for now, I think we're all status cucks who just want to give corporate welfare to Netflix.
Circle.
Yeah,
Speak for yourself, my friend.
Also, there's a conspiracy with libertarians who are white dudes wearing purple shirts. I don't know what it is, but it freaks me the fuck out. Like, I watched a bunch of like Reason.com videos, and I have to do this. I have to put this in there because I'm going to reference it.
James, we're looking at you, boy.
I wore it on purpose
Reason.com
because
and like Ayn Rand Institute, like all these speakers that came
touchdown,
on
bitch.
to talk about how getting rid of net neutrality would be great, and basically all like the really like extremely hardcore libertarian types. We might call them fedora hat wearers.
We do call them fedora hat wearers. There's a fun story to this too.
Yeah.
James says that as if he doesn't wear a fedora.
I was going to say is
Who's
I
wearing
have the Indiana Jones long rimmed fedora, and I almost wore it
You
today.
should. It's going to happen in the future. But anyway, almost all of these guys, they're invariably white dudes, and they were all wearing purple shirts. They were either the button downs like James has, or a polo shirt. Everyone, I was like, purple shirt, purple. Here's a fucking conspiracy. What is up with these purple shirts?
It was brought
With
up
libertarians.
today.
Anytime I see a guy in a purple shirt now, I'll be like,
Well, it's because it's such a royal color and it's just fabulous. No,
Damn right. Actually, the word for this is lavender, not the sound. You know.
I think I think it goes well because usually the first thing when someone says the word libertarian, the first word that comes to my mind is princeling. So like maybe that goes. I don't know, but I had to if I got to dig on.
Most of the sadist cucks refer to me as bourgeoisie, which I think is really cute because I don't know what that word means. But
bourgeoisie.
Let alone spell it.
They're trying to sound fancy.
Guys, watch out for purple shirts. Let's fight for net neutrality, even though we're probably going to lose it because it's not really up to us, unfortunately. And we may end up revisiting this when we get a little opposition in. And dogs like watching TV too. Okay, let's not throttle back their internet either, guys.
Lessons learned.
It's not fair.
The refresh rate.
Dog rights.
So that being said, thank you all for joining us. Brandon, great having you on. Please join our group. I'll hit you up afterwards.
Please do.
We'll bring you in the group. And guys, like our YouTube channel, we're on the net before it's taken away from us.
You can find us on the information superhighway.
Yeah. Oh gosh. You derailed me so much. Yeah, but check us out. Come argue with us because I know there's people out there that disagree. But until then, I'll see you next time. David Papiden,
James McVeigh,
Seth Campbell.
That's it.